I 100% saw it coming, but I 100% did not want to believe it was coming. No one else in my family saw it coming, and no one else in my family wanted to believe that would ever be the truth.
Welcome to Unshut, where nothing is off the table, keeping quiet and holding back is no longer an option. I am your host, Mo. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Mo.
Are you excited?
I'm pumped. This is going to be great.
Are you nervous?
No, not at all. I'm really happy to talk to you about everything.
We're going to be discussing a lot of deep shit. You've been recently dealing with some different changes in your life.
Yep.
That we're going to be talking about. That's going to be the topic of it. So you're good with that?
Yeah, of course.
Let's start with your childhood. What was your childhood like?
I had a really good childhood. It was awesome. We had a bunch of siblings. We're always in sports and doing stuff, just constantly active. It was school, swimming, bed, school, swimming, bed. Just like I was always doing something. It was any single sport. My parents would always say to me, we're going to have you try every sport so that you figure out that you like one of them. And then that's the sport you're going to do, which I wasn't as a kid. You're like, no, I want to stay home and play video games and play outside with all my friends. But I was doing sports and I had no time to get in trouble or do anything wrong. Very suburban, higher end neighborhood for Buffalo, good school districts, no problems. So yeah.
But just pretty normal, right? Like
Very
there was
normal.
nothing crazy. It was like cookie cutter, what
Yeah.
you would think an American family would be.
Exactly, cookie cutter neighborhoods.
Given that you feel like you had a pretty normal childhood, did you ever think that this announcement, this thing that rocked the hell out of your world with your dad, did you see it coming at any point?
That's a tough one. That's a really tough question because I 100% saw it coming, but I 100% did not want to believe it was coming. No one else in my family saw it coming, and no one else in my family wanted to believe that would ever be the truth.
Did you ever think like maybe something is about to happen, you just didn't know exactly what it was? Like leading up to before this big announcement, before what we're going to be talking about?
Yeah, when it was leading up to it, I definitely was catching on to some signals.
Mm-hmm.
And I really did everything in my power to almost prevent it from being true.
The topic, I know people even just 5 minutes into this conversation, they're going to be like, what the fuck are they talking about? Your dad went through a very uncommon transition.
Mm-hmm.
He is now a woman.
Yep.
When did this transition start for your dad?
For my dad, it was fast. For me, noticing the changes, it was maybe a year that I noticed the changes. But for my dad, the change happened very fast.
How long ago was it?
2 years ago, within 6 months, we were pretty much in full transition.
I actually did not know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know how recent it still was.
Yep. Yeah.
When did your dad tell you about his transition?
My dad did not tell me or my sister. We found out in probably the worst way you could possibly find out. My sister, I wish it would have been me who found out because I think I could have handled it better. It wouldn't have rocked my world as much. Whereas, because I kind of saw it coming, was kind of preparing for something. My sister was not.
How old is your sister, real quick? Like, what's the age difference between you guys?
She's 34, so she's 4 years older. So she found out because my dad, and when we get into all of this, you have to forgive me because I am going to switch back and forth between he and she because past tense, I'm talking about he as my father, male, present tense, female, she, still gonna say dad. So he made an Instagram account for his new identity, Stacy. And when you're on Instagram, you get those notifications of, hey, follow this person. And obviously that popped up on my sister's feed because we have the same last name. So she clicked on it and it was my dad in female form. My sister just didn't know what to do. Like, who do you reach out to at that point in time with that information?
Was that also just your dad dressing as a woman, or was this also when did you guys notice she had already gone through some surgical procedures?
This was before everything.
Wow.
This was before surgical procedures. This was my dad was tipping his toe in the water.
How does your sister even break the news to you? Does she send you a screenshot, and what What goes through
No.
your mind?
No, so my sister actually didn't tell me. My sister didn't know who to tell. She took some time, talked to my mom about it, which is tough because go to find out that is the reason why my parents got divorced when I was 3 years old, is because my dad was having these episodes of transitioning and it caused problems in their marriage, obviously.
Your mom just never talked to you and your sister about it.
No, and if you think about it, 20 years ago, how are you going to have that conversation with your children we were children?
And you may feel different about this, so this is just also an outside looking in. It's admirable, in my opinion, because she was not allowing her personal relationship with her husband to also affect the relationship with her kids.
Exactly.
It's still a very private topic, and it wouldn't have mattered if it would have been infidelity or if it would have been anything, right?
Yep.
That's still her personal private relationship with her husband, not between the kids.
That divorce is a whole different story too. They My mom pretty much lost all of their friends that they had together during when they were together, just because my dad had said, "Oh, my mom cheated on him with my now stepdad," and my mom was not going to reveal that was the reason why. So she took that bullet. What is she gonna say? No, this is actually what the truth is. Either no one's gonna believe her, or they're gonna. It could ruin our lives too. Like people could look at us differently.
Wow, so she really did have the opportunity to kind of not out him, but really be like, no, this was the reason why, but she didn't. So
Well,
she just took. That is so interesting. I didn't. That's
yeah,
another. I'm still learning a shit ton
yeah,
about this conversation. That's crazy.
yeah. The only people that did know were his parents at the time. I don't know if my mom's parents knew, or if like direct like siblings. I don't really know if she talked to many people about it. Again, 20 years ago, transgender, it was a weird thing. It's not like what it is now. Like there was no outlet for you to go to. There weren't even
Yeah.
support groups. Like it was weird back then.
Major kudos to your mom because I feel like holding that shit for so many years
Yeah.
must have not been easy, you know?
Yeah, and that really kind of spiraled into how me and my mom ended up having a real problem when all of this happened. When my dad did come out and transition, because my mom had to relive all of that again, except the fact that it was affecting her children now. So
Mm-hmm.
she got pissed, like angry.
Looking back at it though, do you think the things that made her angry or made you angry and how to deal with it was just truly out of protection?
All of it is completely understandable.
Do you feel like finding out in a different way and not through social media or anything like that would have had a different impact on your confusion or on how you dealt with it?
It's funny. I was close to confronting my dad about it. My brother had told me, because you're growing up, you're asking, why did my parents get divorced? Like, someone cheat? Do they fight? They hate each other? Why do they hate each other so much? Why do they literally hate each other so much? I never knew. I knew why his parents got divorced. I didn't know why my parents got divorced. So I asked my brother. He's like, I'm not telling you. He's like, I think I know why, but I'm not telling you. And I was like 12 years old. So then he did eventually tell me when I was still young. Oh, well, your dad was wearing your mom's clothes and like her underwear and stuff. So
And you were 12 at this time.
yeah, and I was like, no way. So then obviously as time goes by, we get to this point where my dad went through a really hard divorce with his most recent wife. He was married for 17 years after my mom. So there was no reason I would have ever thought this would be a possibility. Got divorced and then married again, had a child.
Did you lock that information away or was it something that you just,
I always looked at it.
wow.
I always held on to that, and that's why I was catching on to things. So, just in conversations with my dad was having a hard time after the most recent divorce. So, I went there for Thanksgiving. He started shaving his body, which was new because I remember got in his car when I got off at the airport, and we like bumped arms, and his arm was a little scratchy, and I'm like, what are you shaving your arms now, like what the hell? And I just got this feeling that something was off. So then I remember telling Taylor, I was like, hey, I'm gonna have to go back to visit my dad again because I think shit is hitting the fan. She had talked to me about, hey, so I was trying to search on YouTube TV to like get your dad's TV to work, and like the second search on there was how to transition to a girl. And this is before I even told her anything. So
So you and your wife, you and Taylor, had not even had this conversation
no,
about shit you heard when you were 12 years old or anything like that.
no, not at all.
Wow.
So then she had told me that she saw that, and I just paused because that's big information. What she said was, "What should I do? Should I like delete it? Like, what do you want me to do?" I'm like, "That's what you're concerned about. You're not concerned about what the actual search was." I'm like, "Wow, you're an incredible person."
Yeah.
Like, you
Yeah.
know, I had to explain to her kind of, "Hey, this is what I heard in my life, and this is what I've started noticing." And then I did go back. I think it was like in February. We both went back. My dad was talking about taking a picture with his friend or something, and the girl went behind him and put her hair over his head for the picture. And he's like, "I love the way I looked." And I was like, "Well, yeah, I mean, like all the rockers, and my dad big into like rock and all that stuff and motorcycles." So I was like, "Well, yeah, that's all the rockers did that."
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Grow it out." I was like, "Look at Miley Cyrus. She's doing whatever the hell she wants. Everyone loves her. Like, you can be whatever you want to be." I was trying to say, like, "Hey, let's work together on this." And like he was happy about that. And then that March was when just kind of everything happened. He made the Instagram account. My sister saw it. By March, I was like, I want to talk to my dad one on one and just say, "Hey, what's going on? This is what I'm noticing. This is what I heard. Let's maybe just talk it out." Because we had that relationship. We were super close.
Yeah, but it sounds like everything just went so fucking fast.
Quick.
That's
I
crazy.
couldn't even I couldn't even get to jump the gun on it, but I saw it happening just because of hearing those things throughout
Yeah.
my life. Like the big thing was like the Snapchat filter. The Snapchat filter is what put him over the edge. The Snapchat filter of you looking like a female. He said that was the first time he actually like looked at himself and he was like, "I'm beautiful. That's what I am."
Wow.
Like I can recognize myself in this picture, and like the pictures on the wall of me as a man, I don't see myself.
What surgeries has he had?
Probably some that I don't know about, but definitely a BBL, Brazilian butt lift, because I went and took care of him for that, and then the full on California sex change, that
What's a
whole thing.
California sex
Like
change?
you have to go to California, you get your penis removed and converted into a vagina.
Yeah.
And then I am not sure if there was another surgery, facial, some sort of trimming your forehead down
Mm-hmm.
because males have a more extended forehead and stuff like that. There was talk about that. I was very against surgeries. I said, I don't want to lose you and who
Mm-hmm.
you are. I want to recognize you. I don't want you to be all jacked up with surgeries and it's dangerous.
You had been supportive of, him getting a butt lift or him getting his breasts done, things of that nature, right? Looking back at it, do you think you were afraid of him changing his facial structure because of the fear of never seeing your dad again?
I think I just don't want you to alter yourself so that you look like something you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I want to be able to recognize you, but if I can still recognize you, I'm going to see you as my dad. I'm not, as horrible as it is, I just don't see him as a female
Yeah.
because you're my dad.
With what she looks like now, do you recognize your dad still, or is that,
She still looks like my dad.
yeah,
Like, I'm always going to see my dad.
yeah. Do you think that also comes from you're able to see past the appearance because, like you said, that is just your dad?
It could be.
Post transition, when you see your dad, you still refer to your dad as dad, but the pronouns are she, correct?
I call her Stacy.
So no dad, it's just by first name.
Yeah, and that was more of a request by her because obviously at home, she said, "You're more than welcome to call me dad. I'm still your dad." But like out in public, it gets confusing. That was a big conversation that we had, and I didn't really enjoy the conversation because she still wanted to be dad. She wanted to have her parental name. So then she's like, "Well, you could call me mom," and I said, "Absolutely fucking not. You're not mom. You're dad."
Your youngest sibling is how old?
3 now, I think.
Does she call her mom or
No,
just Stacy?
Stacy.
So your 3-year-old sister doesn't know her as dad.
Kind of,
Gotcha.
because this happened when she was like 1. So she did have dad and daddy. She did say it. Like I was
Wow.
around that.
Mm-hmm.
and they had to discuss what the names would be and how that would be because she's mom. So my dad's like, well, what am I going to be?
It's so confusing for me to even word the question, so I can't even imagine how confusing it is for you to explain it, but also how confusing it is for the 3 year old.
She probably won't know that that is my actual father. Like,
When's the last time you talked with your dad?
on her birthday in July,
Okay.
just said happy birthday. Obviously, Father's Day is a weird day too, but I do say happy Parents' Day.
How does your dad take it when you acknowledge Parents' Day on Father's Day?
Super happy.
That's awesome.
Super happy.
This obviously changed your dynamic with your dad. Do you think the dynamic could ever go back to what it was prior to the transition?
I hope so.
You said you guys used to do a lot of like, and it's not to give the activities a gender, right?
Yeah.
We're truly talking about a childhood where it's like, that's your dad, that's your bud,
Yeah.
right? You guys were doing like motocross, all of this shit together, all these activities that you go back and look at. Those were your manly activities.
Yeah. Smoking
right?
cigars, drinking bourbons. My dad will still do some of that stuff, still rides the motorcycle and stuff, but it's just not the same because it's not the same person anymore. I mean, think about it. If you had, just think about it, your best friend. Just think if you had a best friend who was a guy, then turned to a girl, your interests just change because females like different stuff than guys majority of the time. Especially with my dad transitioning, taking all the hormones and everything. Well, I started loving shopping and cooking and never did any of this stuff growing up. And I was like, well, I don't like shopping. I mean, I like cooking, but like, I don't like shopping. Like, that's not what I'm going to go do.
Well, and it's also the first time she's able to express herself in a more feminine way,
Mm-hmm.
which is crazy, right? Because I fucking love to shop, but I'm not a girl. It's interesting that she is now exploring those things. So you're absolutely right. You couldn't necessarily just go back because those interests are no longer Stacy.
Exactly.
If Stacy called you today and said, "Hey, I want to go riding bikes together. I want to go do these things that we used to do together." Would you give Stacy the opportunity to have those experiences again?
I'd really have to think about it because it really is a mental exhaustion. Just takes a mental toll because you're constantly processing, and it might just be because I'm not around her 24/7, but it's just constantly processing. So activities are very hard to do. Did I do them? Of course. We went to Disney. I went to the busiest place on earth with a transgender father, and she dressed like a newly transgender. Ugly pigtails, biker, camo pink biker shorts, stuck out like a sore thumb. But we did it.
Yeah. Well, and I definitely I don't want people to get the wrong idea with what I'm about to say. I'm understanding it, and I'm not comparing transitioning to death at all. But the first thing I think about is if I lost one of my parents, I would feel almost like I'm betraying my parents by doing those past activities with someone new.
Yeah.
So I definitely see that connection as to why you wouldn't necessarily want to and why it would be such a mental process to do them.
You're not wrong to think about it that way because I actually discussed that with my dad. I was like, "So, what are we going to do now? Like have a funeral for Bob?" And my dad laughed like, "Oh, believe it or not, that people do that.
Wow.
They kill their identity literally." And but you don't realize as a parent like what that does to a child. Like we had to kill off our dad. Like I'm never going to get that back again.
Do you think Stacy expects things to be as they were before?
Yes. She expects them to be exactly the same. She expected them to be the same within 6 months. Because I've had that conversation. She's literally said, it's been a year. It should be okay by now. I deserve as much time that I need to get over this. And I understand people who transition, it's a big toll on them. It's a huge experience and life changing. But you need to remember about like the people who loved you or love you that are experiencing that transition with you. You need to give them the amount of time to transition with you and just you need to appreciate them more because that's life changing for them. I know it's life changing for you and you're struggling, but it's life changing for them.
Don't think that because you're needing time you're not being accepting because even you talked about going on that Disney trip
Yeah.
prior to the transitions where in your opinion she was looking like a very manly man in women's clothing, right? To
Yeah.
me, the fact that you still went to Disney with her, like, that's fucking love, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. My sister was there too, and it was
Mm-hmm.
it was kind of like a family trip.
Were people looking? Could you notice people looking?
I didn't really pay attention.
Yeah.
I didn't really pay attention. Where it gets annoying is some older lady. My dad had walked out of the women's bathroom, and some older lady was like, "Hey, were you our old server at the other restaurant, Jeff?" And my dad lost it. Had a complete mental breakdown. And
What?
yeah, so one, stupid lady, why would you even do that to a random stranger? Clearly they weren't your server. And two, it's like my dad can't have a mental breakdown every time someone thinks differently.
That's someone that went out of their way to be harmful to someone else.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that we have a lot of people who now are transitioning or trying to do shit to get reactions out of people, right? I don't understand a lot of like the modern day pronouns and the modern day transitions that are happening in today's world. But just because I don't understand it doesn't mean I would ever go out of my way to make someone feel bad about it. Like I actually just recently had a cashier did not look feminine at all. I'm talking fucking Adam's apple, butchy. I hate to say it this way, but like stuffed bra. It looked stuffed.
Bombshell bra.
Yup. Yes. Um, and it's hilarious that you talked about the pigtails
Yeah.
because the person that was my cashier had like a braid. It was just fucked up, you know? You obviously know, but I still didn't go out of my way to be like, thank you, sir. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you have to be aware. You have to learn how to read the fucking room. Like, that's their choice. They know that they probably don't necessarily look the part, but just because someone doesn't look the part doesn't mean you get to acknowledge them to what you're actually seeing. But you're obviously wearing this fucking bra and you're dressing this way because it's just who you are. And who the fuck am I to be like, thanks, sir? Like, to me, that's just fucking nasty.
It's funny that you say that because when in the real beginning of this, my dad was very transitioned. And my dad looks like me. We look like siblings almost, just older. And so we were sitting at the bar together. But the server said, "Oh, here you go, ma'am." And my dad lit up. It was like the happiest ever. Like
Mm-hmm.
I just got mammed.
Yeah.
That's what he kept saying. I was like, well, good.
I actually see it a lot in women transitioning as well too. And sometimes I don't even know if they're just butchy lesbians or if they're transitioning, but I avoid those pronouns because I'm cautious that I don't want to be the person that goes out of their way to be hurtful.
Yeah.
So sometimes, and this should just be a fucking lesson to everyone, if you are unsure, be self aware to think about what's about to come out of your mouth and fucking avoid the pronouns.
Just don't.
Just don't use them.
Don't.
It's so easy to just not use them. You don't always have to be like, thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter.
Does the change in your dynamic with your dad also affect your dynamic with your other family members?
If this never happened, me and my sister wouldn't be as close as we are. It brought our family completely together
Love
because
that.
we needed to support each other. So it brought all of us a lot closer in a positive way. Bad way, I really can't talk about it with my mom because I think those are some deep scars, and at the same time, like somebody is affecting the mental capacity of your children. Like Mama Bear is gonna get pissed off.
You have a very humor about it. Like, we were at dinner and we were talking about something just fucking random, and you just shout, well, my dad's a girl now.
Yeah, come at me.
Does
Like
that does that humor come out with your family?
all the time.
Yeah.
I say it in front of my parents because like you have to make light of a situation that could potentially drive people to suicide or drive people insane, you know? Like it really could have I had two paths to take. I could be destroyed by this and my career could have crumbled, my relationship could have crumbled, and I was at that crossroad. I would just have to say like, well, you know what, we can joke about this, and I do. There are
Yeah.
times where I'm just like, yeah, well, not everyone's got a female dad.
Yeah. Keyword for everyone listening, choice.
Yeah, and it was. I will say it was ruining me. I felt it happening. I mean, you're losing your best friend and father.
The idea that you are mourning someone who's not necessarily gone, that is a mind fuck, because you know how when someone loses someone, you almost sometimes have these questions like, I wish I could have asked, but your person's still there.
Yeah.
That's a big mind fuck.
Yeah, it's really crazy. And I will say the weirdest times are, thank God my dad doesn't have her old work phone anymore. My dad had personal phone and work phone. So then one day my dad had her phone died or something. So then my dad texted me or called me from her work phone and it said Babo. And I was like, I like just stomach dropped. Like, oh my God, I'm getting a call from the grave. Because
I,
you need to mentally change it in your brain. This is not this person's name anymore. You need to, she, her, Stacy, and you really need to train yourself. It's very difficult.
no, I mean, it's the mind fuck that we're talking about. It's just, it's so real.
Yeah.
How did Stacy react to your reaction of that phone call?
Understood it, didn't even think anything of it. Was like, oh, I didn't even think that was a big deal. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, you need to understand what you're doing. I understand how people are just like, yeah, I can just transition and like it's great awakening and everything, but you need to remember the wake that is behind that and what it's not negative, but you got to give the people time.
Mm-hmm. Given the fact that she was married and had kids, does she identify as a straight woman now?
The conversation we had was, so in this gender dysphoria, there is people that either they go a couple different ways. So it's either you'd be straight, you'd be a female, and you would like males, or you'd be a female and you like females, or after all of this, you just don't you aren't attracted to any kind. And that's what my dad said she was. She's like, I right now I can't handle that. I can't handle those feelings, and I'm not really attracted to anything.
I'm happy for her
Yeah,
because it is truly a reborn, a rebirth.
you got to figure out yourself.
Exactly. Would it have been different if your dad, as a male, came home with a male versus your dad, as a woman, coming home with a man?
I could have handled the my dad being gay. It would have been so much easier because I wouldn't have been losing a person.
Going back to like the humor that we've talked about, has that always been your personality, or is having a humor about the topic something that was blossomed after having to cope with this situation?
I think I've always just joked around about
Yeah.
negative thing. I like dark humor.
Yeah.
Like, I've always joked around about stuff.
I've always had a very dark humor to trauma. So, yeah, like there are going to be times where it's going to be depressing, where you're going to be angry, but that doesn't mean that you deal with it in that manner all the time. It's okay to laugh at it.
It'll destroy you. And if you want some dark humor, so my dad got the BBL, and my dad was in pain right after surgery, and I mean, she transitioned, had a fake butt, and like all this stuff. Like, this is a messed up situation to be in. And don't I, while she's laying on her bed, face down, I go up and I was like, well, Dad, I mean, you got a BBL. Like, I'm going to bounce a quarter off your ass now. And sure as shit, I bounced a quarter off her ass. I mean, like, you know what? Hey,
Yeah.
you put me through this shit. I'm like, we
Yeah.
got to have some fun with it.
I find it so refreshing. I feel like it's not easy, but it's not easy for you. It's also not easy for her. It's also not easy for your sister. It's just not easy all around. So make the best of it. And I think this is the perfect example of leading life through compassion.
I'd love to know if other people are in the same situation or how they've dealt with it,
Yeah.
if they dealt with it. Because for me in my life, it's only me.
Do you feel like this is something you're going to deal with for the rest of your life?
Of course, I mean, think about it. Think about it. So how I said it affects me and my sister in different ways. It's just me and my wife. My sister has two kids. What does my sister say? Hey, this is your grandparent. Like, what do you name your grandparent? It's not grandpa anymore.
Yeah.
How do you introduce? So if my dad was here, how do I introduce this? Hey, this is my. I can't say dad because then you're instantly gonna say, oh, well, you're transgender, and it's like that. First of all, it's unfair,
Yeah.
and two, it's like, but it's also unfair that I can't introduce you as my dad. But this is what has happened.
This reminds me of a very eye-opening conversation I had with my cousin, who's a lesbian and has kids. She had one day opened up to me about taking her kids to school. She almost every single time has to reintroduce herself as a lesbian mom
Yeah.
versus I never have to go into a room and be like, "Hi, my name is Mo, I'm gay." I don't, there is really no need for that reintroduction. And so it was an eye opening conversation because people would think, like, well, you're both gay, you're both cousins, it's the same story. It's so fucking different. So hearing you talk about how it's you and your sister are in the same situation, but in two completely different ways, I want people to know that. I want people to really think about that. Thursday, we went out to dinner. We were talking about childhoods. And out of curiosity, I was just like, well, is there anything in your childhood you're like, oh, I was puzzling the pieces together?
Yeah. So I was T-ball. So that must have been, I had to at least be 7 years old. So I remember it vividly, obviously. For being that young and having this recollection of memory is crazy. But got done with my T-ball game, and both my mom and stepdad were there. My dad and his new wife were there. At the end of the game, my parents got into a huge fight. My dad pulled my aluminum bat out of my baseball bag and like chased down my stepdad with it. And then my stepmom put me in his car, and that was it. So at that, in my mind, at that time is holy crap, like my parents just brawled, you know. I didn't know what had happened. Now, after all these years, I never knew why that happened. Never asked. My dad's not a violent person
Mm-hmm.
at all. Clearly, he's a girl.
Yeah. And you're
So
and you're kind of like, where the fuck is this aggression coming from? What
yeah, like out
happened?
of nowhere, like I just got done with my t-ball game. Sure as shit. Now that all this came out, I found out that my stepdad wasn't in the wrong. My stepdad did say, made a reference to him being a girl, or oh, what are you, or acting like a girl or something like that. And it wasn't like gay. It wasn't related to gay. It was very related to him being a girl.
Very much so, like if a kid is crying and you're like, oh, stop it, you're being a girl about it, and you go into kind of like poking fun.
It was aggression. It
Yeah.
was aggression, like you're a girl. And my dad freaked out. Now I know the truth that whole time. And I was like, wow.
That's so interesting looking back at that situation that growing up your entire childhood, you had no idea how deep it really was.
I had no idea.
We can't speak to other people's happiness, but do you think post transition, your dad is happier now?
It's tough because my dad was so happy. And I saw my dad in a 6 month time of absolute spiraling out of control to the point where I had to have a weird ass conversation almost, you know? So I'd say, yeah, my dad is back to as happy as like she's was before.
If she were to listen to this episode, how do you think she'll take it? And is there anything you would like to leave on the episode? Something that you would like to say that if she comes across it, that you'd want her to hear?
I think that she'd be sad that I didn't talk to her first. I think she'd rather have an open book, and we had that relationship where we could have that open book conversation
Yeah.
and lay it all on the table. And what I would say is, I think we still need to do that. I don't think that that has happened yet. We've gotten through the crap, and we've done it. We've gotten this far. We got to ash it out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe this episode will be something that we'll get to her, and maybe that could be what opens up the conversation.
Maybe if I'm ready for it, writing things out and not sending them just to get them out of my head. You know, that was actually something my dad had taught me. So it's yeah, it's different things you need to do to be able to express yourself. And I'm a pretty open book. I don't have a hard time doing it. But for a situation like this, it's what can I mentally take, and I want to make sure I get something positive out of it if I'm gonna put myself through it.
For sure. Well, and I definitely don't want to be super corny and be like, thank you so much for being brave. And, but I do think that it is a huge bravery to come on and talk about this topic because think of how many people don't want to openly talk about this because they're afraid that they're going to be like, oh, well, if his dad did that, then he's gay or he's going to transition. I know that's what I want this episode to also be about is that, no, like, stop the ignorance, be respectful and be compassionate, and it does take a certain level of bravery to openly talk about it, so thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. And it completely does. It took me a while to be able to just get the words to come out of my mouth when I did counseling at first. And then when I finished that, and that was with counseling, it wasn't gender specific counseling. And then I went to gender counseling, and that didn't really pair up with my feelings either. So it's been very difficult for me to learn how to talk about it.
What should we name this episode?
Oh, man.
I thought about let's trans about it instead of let's talk about it. I also thought about because
you'll get everyone to view it then.
Yeah. All right. Well, you always make a joke about like my dad's a girl now.
I still think it should be Mimosas with Mike.
Mimosas with Mike.
Because it's going to be a 4-part series.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, thank you so much for coming on and having mimosas and talking about this. So, Mimosas with Mike.
Yeah, right.
That's a wrap.
Thanks.